When Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloom'd, Whitman's Elegy for Lincoln, Summary, Analysis and Themes. Hello and welcome to the discourse. When Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloom'd is one of Walt Whitman's most renowned elegies, written in 1865 as part of his collection Memories of President Lincoln. The poem mourns the assassination of Abraham Lincoln while also reflecting on broader themes of death, nature, and national grief. Unlike conventional elegies, Whitman's work blends personal sorrow with communal mourning, using rich symbolism and a free verse style to create a meditative and deeply emotional tribute. Written shortly after Lincoln's assassination in April 1865, the poem captures the nation's shock and sorrow. Whitman admired Lincoln as a unifying leader during the Civil War, and his death symbolized the fragility of a divided nation. The poem also reflects Whitman's experiences as a witness to the war's devastation, having volunteered in military hospitals. The poem is an elegy, a lyrical lament for the dead, but it transcends traditional forms by incorporating Whitman's signature free verse and expansive imagery. The speaker is Whitman himself, though he adopts a universal voice, anonymous and ungendered, representing both personal grief and the collective mourning of a nation. His tone shifts between sorrow, reverence, and acceptance, capturing the complexity of loss. The tone is solemn yet transcendent, blending despair with moments of consolation. Whitman mourns Lincoln's death, but also contemplates the cyclical nature of life and death, symbolized by the lilac, the evening star Venus, and the hermit thrush's song. The subject is not just Lincoln, but also the broader impact of his death on the American psyche and the natural world's indifference to human suffering. Key themes include mourning and remembrance, the healing power of nature, and the reconciliation with mortality. Whitman intertwines personal grief with national tragedy, suggesting that death is a natural part of life's continuum. The recurring symbols, the lilac, the star, and the bird's song reinforce these themes. While When Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloom'd is Whitman's most expansive and philosophical meditation on death, O Captain, My Captain is his most emotionally direct and accessible. Hushed be the camps today, and this dust was once the man, serve as quieter, more restrained tributes. Together, these poems illustrate Whitman's ability to process grief in multiple forms, from personal anguish to national mourning, while experimenting with different poetic styles. Structure of When Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloom'd. Whitman's Elegy is a free verse poem divided into 16 strophes or sections of varying lengths, totaling 206 lines. Unlike traditional elegies with rigid stanzas, Whitman's structure is fluid, mirroring the organic flow of grief and meditation. The poem deliberately breaks from traditional poetic meter, rejecting structured iambic or trochaic patterns in favor of long, organic lines that mirror the natural rhythms of speech and thought. This free verse approach allows the poem to flow with the cadences of grief, sometimes meandering, sometimes surging forward. Whitman creates a musical, almost incantatory rhythm through techniques like repetition, parallel phrasing, and cataloging, his signature lists of vivid imagery, which build a hypnotic, chant-like quality. The irregular line lengths further reinforce the emotional texture of mourning. Sprawling, multi-clause lines suggest the overwhelming flood of memory and sorrow, while sudden short lines create moments of stark intensity. This fluid structure makes the poem feel less like a composed elegy and more like a living, breathing meditation, one that pulses with the unpredictable waves of loss and consolation. Whitman masterfully structures the poem through three interwoven symbolic motifs that guide the poem's emotional journey: the recurring lilac representing memory and mourning, the fallen star embodying Lincoln's death, and the hermit thrush's song offering spiritual consolation. The early strophes 1 to 4 immediately immerse us in raw grief, introducing the fragrant lilac and the solemn funeral procession carrying Lincoln's coffin across a grieving nation. As the poem progresses into the middle strophes 5 to 13, Whitman expands his meditation beyond personal sorrow to philosophical contemplation of mortality itself, with the hermit thrush's haunting song serving as nature's own elegy that acknowledges death's inevitability. The final strophes 14 to 16 achieve a hard-won sense of reconciliation, where the poet's personal mourning gradually merges with the collective grief of the nation, suggesting that while loss is profound, the natural world's cycles continue and some form of acceptance becomes possible. This careful progression from shock to contemplation to resolution gives the elegy its powerful emotional arc, while maintaining Whitman's characteristically organic, free-flowing style. Apart from symbolism, Whitman has used imagery, anaphora, alliteration, allusion, apostrophe, rhetorical question, personification, repetition, juxtaposition, and metaphor, along with assonance and consonance. Summary of When Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloom'd. Strophe 1, lines 1 to 6. When lilacs last in the dooryard bloomed, and the great star early drooped in the western sky in the night, I mourned, and yet shall mourn with ever-returning spring. Ever-returning spring, Trinity sure to me you bring. Lilac blooming, perennial and drooping star in the west, and thought of him I love. Whitman's opening lines establish the poem's central themes of grief, memory, and cyclical nature. The speaker recalls the moment when lilacs, symbolizing renewal, were blooming just as Lincoln, the great star, Venus, died, an image that binds personal loss to the natural world. The ever-returning spring becomes both a comfort and a curse. It brings the lilac's beauty but also forces the speaker to relive his mourning annually. The cyclical renewal of spring contrasts with the human mortality. Nature persists despite loss. Whitman masterfully employs repetition and anaphora to underscore the cyclical nature of grief, with phrases like ever-returning spring and I mourned, yet shall mourn, creating a haunting refrain that emphasizes how sorrow persists across time. The poem's rich allusions deepen its historical resonance, particularly the great star, a reference to Venus shining in the western sky on the night of Lincoln's assassination, transforming an astronomical detail into a poignant symbol of loss. Central to the poem's structure is the Trinity motif, which weaves together the lilac, memory, the star, Lincoln's legacy, and the speaker's love into a sacred framework for mourning, elevating personal grief to a universal meditation. Whitman further animates the natural world through personification, as seen in the star that drooped, as though the cosmos itself mourns alongside humanity. Finally, the stark contrast between spring's vibrant renewal and death's unyielding permanence heightens the poem's emotional tension, reinforcing the paradox of life continuing even in the face of profound loss. Together, these devices create a layered, immersive elegy that balances intimate sorrow with cosmic reflection. Strophe 2, lines 7 to 11. O powerful western fallen star, O shades of night, O moody, tearful night, O great star disappeared, O the black murk that hides the star, O cruel hands that hold me powerless, O helpless soul of me, O harsh surrounding cloud that will not free my soul. These lines erupt in anguished apostrophe, directly addressing Lincoln, the fallen star, and the oppressive darkness of grief. The speaker laments both the loss of the great star, Lincoln's death, and his own powerlessness against fate, cruel hands, harsh surrounding cloud. The imagery shifts from cosmic, the vanished star, to visceral, the suffocating black murk, mirroring how grief transforms from abstract sorrow into a smoothing, almost physical force. The insistent O, repeated 5 times, creates a lamentation rhythm, echoing funeral dirges of biblical psalms of despair. Tactile imagery of cruel hands that hold me powerless makes grief feel physically constricting, like being bound. Harsh surrounding cloud is a metaphor for extended sorrow, as the nation is filled with mourning for the great loss. Strophe 3, lines 12 to 17. In the dooryard fronting an old farmhouse near the whitewashed palings, sound the lilac bush, tall, growing, with heart-shaped leaves of rich green, with many a pointed blossom rising delicate, with the perfume strong I love, with every leaf a miracle, and from this bush in the dooryard, with delicate colored blossoms and heart-shaped leaves of rich green, a spring with its flower I break. These lines paint a vivid sensory portrait of the lilac bush, anchoring Whitman's abstract grief in tangible, earthy details. Lines flow without pauses and zappment, mirroring the unbroken growth of the lilac and the speaker's stream of consciousness. The scene, a rural farmhouse with whitewashed fences, evokes nostalgia and domestic tranquility, while the lilac's heart-shaped leaves and delicate colored blossoms symbolize love and memory. The speaker's act of breaking a sprig, later placed on Lincoln's coffin, transformed the lilac into a ritual offering, bridging personal mourning and collective tribute. Unlike the cosmic despair of the fallen star passage, this stanza grounds grief in life's persistent beauty. The contrast between the lilac's vitality, tall, growing, versus Lincoln's death foreshadows the poem's tension between decay and renewal. Strophe 4, lines 18 to 25. In the swamp, in secluded recesses, a shy and hidden bird is warbling a song. Solitary the thrush, the hermit withdrawn to himself, avoiding the settlements, sings by himself a song, song of the bleeding throat, death's outlet song of life, for well, dear brother, I know, if thou was not granted to sing thou wouldn't surely die. In these lines, Whitman introduces the hermit thrush, a solitary bird whose song becomes the poem's most haunting symbol of death and transcendence. Unlike the communal mourning represented by the lilac and the star, the thrush exists in secluded recesses of a swamp, embodying isolation and introspection. Its song, a bleeding throat pouring forth, is paradoxically both a lament, death's outlet, and a celebration of life, suggesting that art and beauty arise from suffering. The parenthetical aside, for well, dear brother, I know, reveals the speaker's kinship with the bird. Both understand that song is not just expression but survival. The thrush's song is the poem's spiritual climax. While the lilac and star symbolize collective mourning, the bird's music offers a mystical perspective that death might not be an end but a passage. Its bleeding throat parallels Whitman's own act of writing this elegy, painful, necessary, and ultimately life-giving. Strophe 5 and 6, lines 26 to 45. Over the breast of the spring, the land amid cities, here coffin that slowly passes, I give you my sprig of lilac. These sections depict Lincoln's funeral procession as it moves across a grieving nation, blending intimate sorrow with collective mourning. Whitman juxtaposes the vibrant renewal of sprig, violets peeped, apple tree blows, with the solemn journey of the coffin, creating a stark contrast between life's persistence and death's inevitability. The procession becomes a national ritual. Cities draped in black, crowds of crepe-wheeled women, and dirges echoing through the night, uniting the country in shared grief. Whitman lists images, flags, torches, faces to convey the scale of national grief, overwhelming in its detail. The coffin's journey becomes a dark odyssey metaphor with the silent sea of faces as its witness. The speaker's final gesture, offering a sprig of lilac to the passing coffin, merges personal tribute with public ceremony, symbolizing both love and remembrance. The funeral procession, observed by both the speaker and the nation, anchors Whitman's abstract meditations on death in a specific historical moment, Lincoln's burial. Yet the lilac's return each spring promises that remembrance, like nature, will endure. Strophe 7, lines 46 to 54. Nor for you, for one alone, for you and the coffins of all of you, O death. In this section, Whitman expands his elegy beyond Lincoln's death to address mortality itself. The speaker declares that his offerings of blossoms, lilacs, roses, and lilies are not just for one fallen leader but for all coffins, universalizing grief. The tone shifts from sorrow to a strange celebration, addressing death as sane and sacred, acknowledging its inevitability and even its paradoxical beauty. The act of breaking copious lilac sprigs becomes a ritual of abundance rather than scarcity, suggesting that love and remembrance can flourish even in loss. This section resolves the poem's tension between despair and consolation. By addressing death itself, not just Lincoln, Whitman elevates the elegy from a personal or political lament to a philosophical meditation on mortality. The sprig of lilac is no longer just a tribute, it becomes an offering to the universal human experience of loss. The stanza offers the total shift of tone. Earlier stanzas lament, here the speaker embraces death as part of nature's order. The chant-like quality suggests acceptance, even transcendence. Whitman does not defeat grief, he ritualizes it, turning mourning into an act of reverence. The poem's power lies in this balance. Death is terrible yet natural. Sorrow is profound yet survivable. Strophe 8, lines 55 to 65. O western orb sailing the heaven, concluded, dropped in the night, and was gone. This passage captures a moment of eerie communion between the speaker and the western orb, Venus symbolizing Lincoln, in the nights leading up to the assassination. Whitman recalls how a month earlier he sensed an unspoken foreboding as the star seemed to droop toward him with silent sorrow. The star's descent, dropped in the night and was gone, mirrors Lincoln's sudden death, while the speaker's insomnia and restless wandering reflect his subconscious anticipation of loss. The lines blur the boundary between celestial event and human intuition, suggesting that grief can be felt before it is understood. The speaker retroactively gives meaning to intuition. Whitman implies that grief is not just a response to death, but also pre-existing state, an unspoken dialogue with the universe. The star's disappearance mirrors how loss leaves the bereaved grasping at signs that once felt significant. Strophe 9, lines 66 to 70. Sing on there in the swamp, the star my departing comrade holds and detains me. In these lines, Whitman captures a moment of suspension between life and death, as the speaker hesitates to join the hermit thrush in the mournful song. The thrush, symbolizing nature's wisdom about mortality, calls to the poet with its bashful and tender notes offering solace. Yet the speaker lingers, held by the lustrous star, Lincoln's memory, torn between earthly attachment and the bird's transcendental acceptance of death. This tension reflects the human struggle to release grief, even when confronted with nature's serene perspective. Strophe 10, lines 71 to 77. Oh, how shall I warble myself for the dead one there I loved? I will perfume the grave of him I love. In these lines, Whitman grapples with how to properly honor the dead, specifically Lincoln, referred to as the large sweet soul that has gone. The speaker questions how to warble, sing, and deck adorn his song of mourning, and what perfume tribute he can offer. The rhetorical questioning, how shall I warble, what shall my perfume be, expresses the poet's struggle to articulate grief, framing the elegy as both a personal and artistic challenge. The answer comes in the form of natural forces. Sea winds from the east and west converge on the prairies, symbolizing a unified nation's grief, and the speaker vows to blend these elemental forces with the breath of my chant, his poetry, to create a fragrant living memorial. Perfume becomes a metaphor for poetry. The speaker's chant becomes a sensory tribute, like the lilac's fragrance, transient yet recurring, like memory itself. This transforms personal sorrow into a communal, almost mythic act of remembrance. Strophe 11, lines 78 to 88. Oh, what shall I hang on the chamber walls, and all the scenes of life, and the workshops, and the workmen homeward returning? In this section, Whitman grapples with how to memorize Lincoln, transforming the abstract concept of burial house into a vibrant celebration of life itself. Rejecting conventional mourning imagery, he chooses to adorn the walls with scenes of spring's vitality, domestic tranquility, and the rhythms of daily labor, painting death not as an end, but as part of enduring cycle. The fourth month eve, April 14, the night of Lincoln's assassination, is framed not with horror but with the golden light of sinking sun, suggesting that even tragedy is enveloped in nature's beauty. The panoramic imagery, from rivers to cities, positions Lincoln's death within the full tapestry of American life, implying that his legacy lives on in the land and people he served. Whitman redefines what an elegy can do. Instead of freezing Lincoln in death, he immerses him in the world's vitality. The burial house becomes a window onto America's resilience, affirming that grief need not eclipse gratitude for life. Whitman's pictures are anti-monuments. They reject marble statue in favor of the breast of the river and stacks of chimneys, arguing that Lincoln's greatest tribute is a united, working, breathing America. Strophe 12, lines 89 to 98. Lo, body and soul, this land, over my cities shining all, enveloping man and land. In this exultant passage, Whitman expands his elegy into a panoramic ode to America itself, binding Lincoln's memory to the land's physical and spiritual grandeur. The speaker, embodying both body and soul, surveys the nation from Manhattan's spires to the far-spreading prairies, framing grief within the vastness of the living, breathing country. The sun, rivers, cities, and seasons become active participants in mourning, their beauty both a balm and a testament to what Lincoln fought to preserve. Unlike traditional elegies that dwell in shadow, Whitman's lines blaze with light, from sparkling tides to the fulfilled noon, suggesting that remembrance can be as luminous as it is sorrowful. Whitman refuses to let Lincoln's death diminish the world's beauty. Instead, he magnifies both, showing how the slain president's spirit infuses the very fabric of America, its light, its waters, its labor. This is elegy as rebirth, where sorrow fuels deeper love for what endures. Strophe 13, lines 99 to 107. Sing on, you grey-brown bird, yet the lilac with mastering order holds me. In this section, Whitman reaches a moment of transcendent communion with the hermit thrush, whose song becomes a conduit for both profound sorrow and spiritual release. The bird's liquid and free notes, rising from the swamp's solitude, offer a pure, almost sacred expression of grief, voice of uttermost woe. Yet the speaker remains tethered to earthly symbols of mourning, the star, Lincoln, and the lilac, memory. The tension between the thrush's unbounded song and the speaker's lingering attachments captures the human struggle to fully surrender to consolation, even when it is offered. The thrush's music is both a human song, mirroring the poet's elegy, and something wild and loose, beyond language, embodying the paradox of grief as both deeply personal and universally natural. The thrush's song is the closest Whitman comes to transcending grief, yet his inability to fully release the star and lilac reveals how human attachment complicates consolation. The passage dramatizes the elegy's central struggle: to mourn is to love, and to love is to cling. Strophe 14, lines 108 to 162. Now while I sat in the day and looked forth, I float this carol with joy to thee, O death. This section marks Whitman's transcendent acceptance of death, framed as a mystical communion with the hermit thrush's carol of death. The speaker, surrounded by the bustling life of spring, farmers, children, ships, and cities, suddenly confronts the long black trail of death's presence. Yet, instead of recoiling, he walks hand in hand with death, personified as a dark mother and strong deliveress, and flees to the swamp where the thrush sings. The bird's song becomes a sacred dialogue, reconciling the poet to mortality by reframing death as a natural, even lovely and soothing force. Whitman's ecstatic praise for death's cool and folding arms resolves the poem's tension, merging grief with cosmic unity. The vibrant field of spring and teeming wharf's life are abruptly shadowed by the long black trail, death, underscoring how mortality permeates even the most lively scenes. Juxtaposition. Whitman implicitly addresses the Civil War in this section, though he does so through symbolism, juxtaposition, and the shadow of collective mourning. The Civil War haunts the poem like the dark mother, unseen but omnipresent. Whitman's elegy is not about battles, but about how a nation carries loss forward, just as the thrush's song carries sorrow into the trees. This passage resolves the elegy's central conflict by embracing death as part of nature's cycle, not Lincoln's antagonist, but his deliveress. Whitman transforms grief into a hymn. The thrush's carol, the poet's chant, and the whispering wave become one voice, suggesting that mourning, when fully felt, leads to unity with the cosmos. Whitman's vision is radical. He does not just accept death, he celebrates it as the completion of life's joy and love. Strophe 15, lines 163 to 184. To the tally of my soul and the armies that remained suffered. In this visceral section, The speaker, guided by hermit thrush's pure deliberate notes, experiences a visionary reckoning with the Civil War's carnage. The bird's song becomes a psychic conduit, unlocking long panoramas of visions, where the poet witnesses battle flags shredded, corpses piled in myriads, and skeletal remains. Yet this horror is transfigured by the thrush's wisdom. The dead were fully at rest, while the living, mothers, wives, comrades, surviving soldiers, bear the true suffering. The scene merges elegy with prophecy, exposing vast duality of destruction and eerie peace. These lines shatter the elegy's earlier abstraction, where prior stanzas meditate on death philosophically. Here, Whitman confronts war's literal debris, yet finds solace not in victory but in death's release. It is one of the most anti-war moments in the 19th century poetry, marked as transcendence. The thrush's song does not glorify death but exposes war's fertility. Those white skeletons are the true debris, yet Whitman insists they are at peace, a radical consolation pitched against nationalism. Stanza 16, lines 165 to 206. Passing the visions, passing the night, there in the fragrant pines and the cedars dusk and dim. In this final strophe, Whitman achieves hard-won reconciliation, releasing his grief for Lincoln while weaving together the poem's central symbols, the lilac, star, and the hermit thrush, into a lasting spiritual tapestry. The speaker passes beyond his visions of war and death, unclasping the hands of his comrades, memory and sorrow, but preserving their essence. The thrush's song, now fully internalized as the tallying chant of my soul, becomes a victorious song, not triumphant over death, but transcendent through acceptance. The lilac, left blooming in the dooryard, promises cyclical renewal, while the lustrous and drooping star, Lincoln, fades into the night. Whitman's elegy concludes not with closure, but with a sacred note of remembrance. Nature, the dead, and the poet's voice entwined in the fragrant pines and cedars dusk and dim. Whitman does not resolve grief, but alchemizes it into art. The poem's ending mirrors its opening. The lilac blooms again, but now the speaker has internalized the thrush's wisdom. Death is neither enemy nor end, but part of a fathomless universe that also holds life and joy. The cedars dusk and dim recall the swamp's solitude, but now feel peaceful, not eerie. Whitman's elegy ends where it began, in a garden, but the speaker is changed. The war's trauma, Lincoln's murder, and the thrush's carol are woven into his soul, like the debris of battle transformed into psalm. So this is it for today. We will continue to discuss the history of American English literature. Please stay connected with the discourse. Thanks and regards.